Hi guys, and welcome to yet another webinar. Today's webinar I think you're going to get a lot out of. It'd be pretty silly for me to say the opposite, wouldn't it? Can you imagine if one of my intros to the webinar would be, hi everybody, welcome to the webinar. Today's webinar is going to be awful. There will be no content in here and there'll be nothing at all that you could get out of it. I always think that's really weird when the Tonight Show hosts come out, which you can see I'm with the big microphone and the whole thing happening here. I'm a wannabe Tonight Show host. It's a frustration of mine. But I always think it's really weird when, Jay Leno, or in Australia, the Bert Newtons and the Don Lanes of this world in yesteryear would come out and say, we've got a great show lined up for you tonight. I'm thinking, what else would they say? I mean, is that a surprise? Of course they're supposed to have a great show. But I have got a webinar lined up for you today of a subject matter which is pretty close to all of our hearts, and that is brand persona. In other words, what is your business's personality? Now, I don't need to explain to you that mine's rather cheeky and irreverent. That's just the way I am, and so therefore I hang around with a lot of cheeky and irreverent people. And you know that it's all tongue-in-cheek, the whole criticism thing, and being the Gordon Ramsay, if you like, of the advertising world. But that's my personality, so I may as well take advantage of it. Okay, so therefore, if you've got a cheeky demeanour and you are a bit left of centre, then take advantage of it. And that's what Steve Irwin did. That's what Paul Hogan certainly does. That's what the likes of Bert Newton does. They use that cheeky humour to their advantage, and that's their brand persona. So you've got to determine for your business, what is your brand persona. In my instance, in I guess the last 18 months, I've taken the brand persona of my business up a notch or two because I wanted to attract different levels of business, and so therefore I made sure that my website looks like it's closer to a David Jonesy sort of feel than a Kmart feel, because I wanted to take up that brand persona so I could attract some bigger businesses who would pay me some more money. That's not to say that I still don't attract smaller businesses, because they will come anyway. But what I found is that when I had a brand persona that was more, if you like, Kmarty, then of course businesses that were doing $5 or $10 or $50 million thought, I wonder if he can look after me. When in fact I've looked after McDonald's, and I've looked after Hilton Hotels, and I've looked after 7-Eleven and Blockbuster and the Greater Building Society. I've looked after businesses that are billions of dollars in revenue or value, but because my website tended to target smaller businesses, then of course when they looked at me they thought, I wonder if you can look after me. So I had to make sure that I changed my brand persona, that I could actually widen my funnel. So what I want you to do is consider at the end of this webinar, if your brand persona, if your personality actually matches the target audience that you're chasing. And there's a lot of times that it just isn't. And I know that I've probably told you guys before that, I have clients come on board who are David Jones, but dressed in buy-low clothing. So a great example of that, I believe, was the Lobster Cave down in Melbourne, which is a very upmarket restaurant in Beaumaris. Bill Ferg is the owner of that restaurant, a fantastic entrepreneur, a very successful restaurant, by the way, for the past 15 or 20 years. But when I looked at his website, he was clearly David Jones dressed up in buy-low clothing. And I said that to him and he laughed. He's a pretty good sport. He had BMWs and Mercedes parked outside his restaurant, but when you looked at his website, it looked like Kmart. It looked like it was a local cafe. And his, I think, cheapest main meal is $51 or $52, so he's certainly not the local cafe. And so therefore I convinced him that he needed to take his website and all of his communications upmarket, so that he had a message to market match, so that when he was talking to people who owned a BMW or a Mercedes online through his website or through any of the collateral that he was putting out, then there was a message to market match. And I thought this was appropriate to talk about this because I know that within our masterclass group, we have a number of businesses that fall into that category, whereby they are chasing a particular level of client, but then their marketing and their collateral and their website does not match that. Now, I know it can go the other way, that you might be a Kmart Big W style business, but you've got an upmarket brand persona, but that doesn't happen very often. It's normally the other way around. It's normally that you have a prestigious or upmarket brand, positioning, but your communications are not matching that. That's what generally happens. And I think if you've seen some of my samples on Wow Central, I guess one of the better ones is Maura McGill, who was who is the menopause expert, and so therefore she helps ladies who are going through menopause use natural therapy to fix their issues. And she's the Steve Irwin of that industry. She's probably Australia's leading menopause expert in terms of being a doctor with that particular focus. She's been on the Today Show and the current affairs and all of this. When anybody wants to come to an expert with regards to women's health issues, particularly menopause, then Dr. Maura McGill is the door that they knock on. And yet when she came on board my program, her website didn't position her like that at all, nor did her collateral. And you've probably seen me show the before and afters in terms of her collateral. If you wanted to have a look at that, by the way, just go to our website, that's the instituteofwow.com, and go onto the website transformation subpage, and you'll see what happened with Dr. Maura McGill's business. In fact, go onto the case studies page there as well, because there's a case study on her as well, where we've taken her brand and put it in the level that it should have been, and simply marketed her to rich women with menopause, not poor women with menopause, got her to increase her prices, and the rest is history. Okay, so therefore she decided to target women with money, and particularly on the Gold Coast, we know where they live. It's the Sanctuary Cove, and it's the Sovereign Islands, and it's a number of other suburbs. And of course they will pay probably double, probably triple what someone from the western suburbs will pay to fix their menopause issue. When you've got a menopause problem or any sort of health issue, ask yourself, does money really come into the equation if there's a possible solution? No. So therefore, if you are a wizard in that particular area, then and you can deliver quick results, there's a good chance you can hike up your prices. And so you should, because you're delivering a pretty special solution to somebody's problem. Now, I know that what I'm about to provide you on screen as an example of positioning your brand perhaps lower than what you should will bring a smile to the face of two new masterclass clients, and it's Rob and Julie, who own the Gold Coast Bakery. Now, I was with Rob and Julie this week. It so happens that their bakery is on the way home for me from lots of locations. We live in the bush, and so therefore I do drive past their bakery heading to my place, and it's in a working class suburb, and so therefore I called in, and instead of having my 1 hour Skype call with them over Skype, I did it on one-to-one because it was just convenient. I happened to be driving past their business. And when I called in there this week, it was a fun meeting. They're really, really good sports, and I hope they don't mind me bringing this up here, but it's for the benefit of them and for the benefit of the whole masterclass team that I do start on their particular business or their case study. They have a bakery which makes the best pies in Queensland. They've purchased this bakery about 9 months ago. It was a little run down, and so therefore they've really lifted the game of the bakery. They have a wholesale division and a retail store, and it's a bakery stroke cafe, and they have certainly done a great job in 9 months to get it to where it is right now, but now it's ready to go to the next step. And when I met with them, I just said, oh dear, look, we're going to have to really seriously consider changing the colours, the toning of your bakery to be more browns and more tans, and to take it a little upmarket. It's in a working class suburb called Nerang, and so therefore we realised that you can't take it to the Palazzo Versace area, but I think we need to take their brand positioning certainly upmarket from where it is. And let me show you the photo of the exterior of their shop, so that you understand what I'm talking about. I'll just get that up for you right now. Okay, so this is the exterior of their bakery at the moment. And look, you'll see exteriors of shops like that all over the Gold Coast and Melbourne and Sydney every day of the week. However, if you're going down the path of providing comfort food, the likes of warm buns and and organic bread and beautiful meat pies and pastries and bagels and things like that, then red and canary yellow are not the colours that you should be using, okay? And when I spoke to Rob about that, he quite rightly said, look, JD, when I repainted the store, because he actually did repaint it when he took it over 9 months ago, I went for the fire engine red and the canary yellow because really, if you think about fast food, that's the colours that they use. He said, I did a bit of research. And yes, McDonald's do use yellow and red, but what I explained to Rob and Julie is that, look, I think you should not be in the fast food arena. I think you're in the area of having comforting food, where you want a lovely warm meat pie on a winter's day, or you want a beautiful hot bun, or you want a beautiful pastry, or you want a nice hot coffee. And I don't think red and canary yellow does it. You'll see here that this is a shot of the inside of the shop. And what I've suggested to Rob and Julie, and please, Rob and Julie, if you're watching this, and hopefully you are good sports about this, because the thing is, I think you've done a fantastic job to bring the business to the level that you have. But it was just very timely that when I'm going to be talking about brand positioning and I guess personalities of business, that I could use you guys as a case study. I know you're going to absolutely, kill it in terms of taking the business forward from here with our marketing plan. But what I've said to Rob and to Julie is that, look, if it's not too much trouble, is there a chance? Rob's a builder, by the way, so therefore he can do a lot of this sort of stuff himself. I said to Rob, look, is there a chance we can change that yellow and red into browns and tans? A little bit like the colour, if you like, of the fixtures that you can see there, where the cakes and pastries are in at the moment. Just go into Gloria Jeans or Zarafas and take a lot of photos and just steal their colouring. That's what I said to Rob, and that's what he intends doing. I mean, they're great clients because they're rolling their sleeves up and they're willing to give a shot for anything that makes sense, and I think this makes sense. This happens to be a shot of their signage on top of one of the counters, and Rob was laughing when I went up to take a photo of that, meeting with him throughout the week. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Look, it's just that if we do, change the persona to more of a cafe and modern contemporary sort of relaxing look, then I think we have to," he's going to laugh when he hears me say this. Hopefully he will laugh. I said, "We've got to get rid of the tuck shop signs," put together by the tuck shop committee. And Rob and Julie said to me, "JD, I'll have you know that our $10 upsell special, which is, do you want fries with that, of the meat pie, the drink, and whatever it was, the other thing, we sell a gazillion of. It's a fantastic upsell." I said, "Matt, please, congratulations on that. All I'm saying is that if we're going to change the overall demeanour of the bakery to a cafe stroke bakery, then I think we must have the signage sort of follow suit." And both Julie and Rob understand that, so there's no problems in that regard. So Rob and Julie, hopefully you're great sports, and I'm sure you are. You don't mind me bringing that up, because I think that your case study is a very relevant one to what I'll be showing for the rest of this webinar. It's all about positioning your business to suit the needs and wants of your target audience. And on one side of the fence, one might say, well, Rob and Julie with the Gold Coast Bakery have a lot of tradies that just, pop in. And you may think that the tradies are the normal guys that are scratching their groin and they've got a cigarette hanging out of their mouth. And they just want to get the Coke and the pie and jump back in the truck and get on the job. But at our get-together, Rob and Julie fortuitously invited a representative who goes around and visits lots of cafes and bakeries. And this particular chap's name was Mark. And I was so glad that Rob and Julie had the foresight to get him involved in our joint meeting, because what Mark could bring to the table, given that he acts as a distributor for, I think he said 100 bakeries or cafes stretching from the southern Gold Coast right through to up towards Brisbane, was that he could give his viewpoint on contemporary bakeries and cafes. And he said, look, they aren't bright yellow and red or orange or anything like that anymore. The ones that are really working have gone very minimalistic, so they don't have any stuff around the walls. They hardly have any signage on top of the counters. If it is, then it's minimalistic signage. It's lots of browns and tans. And even McDonald's, when you think about it, the cafe section of their restaurant now has gone very minimalistic and very browns and tans and very comforting colours. The hamburger side of things might still be yellow and red, but certainly the McCafe side of things, they've gone exactly the same way. And that's what I've said to Rob and to Julie, just duck out and take photos of all of these other contemporary cafes, a lot of which are in the Westfieldy sort of shopping centres, and provided the budget. Of course, it's all very fine for me to come up with these ideas. I think Rob might have to go and rob a bank, but not really. No, not really. Look, Rob's got building skills, and so therefore he explained to me that this is not out of the question, because he can actually do a lot of this himself, which is great. And I'm still talking about a relatively modest makeover, even if they did have to get a third party to look after it for them. And so therefore, Mark, the chap who has been, sort of involved in the industry for a while, said to me and said to Rob and said to Julie, look, for a bakery to really make it in this day and age, you have to accept that the tradies are now even going more upmarket. Not all of them, but he said, in the old days it would be the standard cigarette, can of Coke and a meat pie. He said now it'll be a gourmet sandwich and a cafe coffee, like a latte coffee. Maybe still the cigarette outside, but they are certainly looking after themselves in terms of their food choices better than they used to, at least some of them are. And so therefore, Mark actually suggested to Rob and to Julie that they might like to look at their menu and even take their menu up. They've apparently got fantastic gourmet sandwiches. Julie showed me a photo of the gourmet sandwich and it looks like it's just incredible, and they're building a reputation for that as well. So Mark was explaining where that should be positioned in terms of the display cabinet in store, where the pies should be positioned, and so on and so forth. I won't go on any more about the Gold Coast Bakery store except to say to you that it was a classic case study just this past week of what really is a big part of my mantra. And my mantra is message to market match, and that means making sure that you've got the right message to the right market. But at the same time, before you even do that, you have to determine what your message is going to be. Are we Bi-Lo? Are we Kmart? Are we David Jones? Or are we Palazzo Versace? Where do we fall in that food chain? And you've got to ask yourself that question, because really once you've answered that, then it will dictate everything about your communications. It'll dictate whether your website screams that you are at the lower end, in other words, you're the Crazy Clarks of your industry, or whether you are the middle ground, which means that you might be the Walmart of your industry or Kmart of your industry, or are you upmarket, which might mean that you are the exclusive jeweler, you are Maya, or you are the Palazzo Versace. That's the easiest one I can always give everyone an impression for. If I say Palazzo Versace, they know Italian marble floors and beautiful columns and everything upmarket. And you need to determine where you fall in that area. Now, in my case, I've told you at the beginning of this webinar, I decided that because I wanted to attract some bigger businesses, and that's not saying I want to attract all bigger businesses, but the truth of the matter is that, you know, for my fees, for my marketing masterclass or for any private coaching, for a large business doing, you know, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, $400 million, they spill more than that before breakfast. I know at the Greater Building Society, when I was charging them what I thought was a reasonable consultancy fee, they spilt more than that before breakfast. They were a $5.2 billion business. So don't you think it would be easier for me to sell my services to a big business like that who's wasting a lot of money on their marketing, and they see me as an incredibly low investment for a great return? Of course, it's much easier for me to sell to them than it is to sell to a startup business who maybe have just borrowed some money from the bank to set up their business and they're running it from home. They've decided that it's going to be a business that involves a sewing machine and that's all they've got the money for. To buy into my program, whilst they know they need it, it's a big, big decision. And so therefore it made sense for me to position my business in such a way that I could attract those bigger businesses, but at the same time, still attract the smaller ones. So I didn't position myself so elite, if you like, in terms of, you know, this marketing guru and you may have to pay a fortune for him, that I was going to scare away the smaller ones. It's just that I didn't want to scare away the bigger ones because they were easy catch. Okay. Now you've got to decide for your business and for your products and services exactly where you fit in that food chain. I've got to throw up a slide which sort of prompted this discussion as well. And this one here is for Woolworths. Let me just bring it up here. This is a retargeting campaign that Woolworths have had on in the last week. And it's just stupid. Okay. As you know, I used to be in the national marketing role with the Woolworths organisation many thousands of years ago. However, I really think that in the last short while, their advertising has really diminished in its strategic thinking. This here, let's have a look at it. It's a retargeting ad by Woolworths, and you've got a child there who's choking. Maybe he's not joking, but anyway, I don't know what that photo's all about. I know exactly how that came about. You've got the creative director with the ponytail, and he said, you know what, I just think it would be a gorgeous idea to get a cute little boy and shove an orange in his mouth, and let's just take a photo of that. I mean, look, it could be an ISIS torture chamber for all I know. I've got no idea. It's just crazy. That photo makes no sense. And of course, the tagline, what is it? That's why I pick Woolies. That's why I pick, what the hell is that all about? And that brings me back to the subject of taglines, because that has a lot to do with your brand persona or your personality. Our tagline at the Institute of WOW is learn to deliver the unexpected. And I don't think anyone that comes into my environment could argue that after a month or two or three, they haven't learned that this wow factor marketing is all about being the of their industry, being an undoctor, an unaccountant, an unbaker, an undentist. In other words, I'm showing you how to deliver the unexpected, how to be different. And I don't think anyone could argue, even after the first Skype call that I have with them, that that's not loud and clear, a pretty valuable learning that they get. In order to stand out, you need to be like Steve Irwin. There were lots and lots and lots of wildlife experts out there, and of course they've all come out of the woodwork in recent years after Steve tragically passed away. But when Steve was with us, they were still there. It's just that he sucked up all the oxygen in the room because he was very different. He was, excuse the pun, but he was wild. He was zany. He was nutty. He did crazy things. He was terrific in terms of working with the camera. He was the of what was a pretty boring industry. The rest of them were, Richard Attenborough wannabes. They were very, mild in their language, and have a look at this leopard here as the leopard jumps on top of the beetle or whatever the hell it was. It was very structured and it was very Richard Attenborough. Now, it works for him, that's fine. But everyone else decided to be a me too of him. So it was all whispering. Hey, let's just have a look what this elephant does to the other elephant. Steve Irwin comes along and starts screaming, and not screaming, but certainly he came along and added a whole new personality demeanour to that wildlife industry. And he stood out from the crowd. And that's what Richard Branson has done across a number of industries, but probably the best known, particularly in Australia, would be the airline industry. He came along and smacked Qantas up the backside because he was different. He was the of the industry. His hostesses look like Miss Worlds. You get onto the Qantas plane and the hostesses look like they've come from a retirement village sometime. Oh boy, I'm going to get some complaints about that, aren't I? But the point is, Richard Branson gets away with painting bikini girls on the nose of his planes. And who gets away with that in this day and age? Well, I'll tell you who gets away with that. People who are likeable and cheeky and maybe a little irreverent, but tongue-in-cheek. I mean, they're not seriously irreverent. And they are the of their industry. He's got exactly the same aeroplanes as Qantas or any of the other airlines. But guess what? He's made sure that he's different. He stands out. He paints things on the front of his planes that other airlines don't. He has, yes, Miss World hostesses. He has a bar in the plane where you can go up and get a drink if you sit in the right seats, And he takes outrageous photos and does publicity stunts. He does everything that no other airline does. And so therefore he's created a cheeky, irreverent brand persona for Virgin Airlines, and has been very successful doing that. And that's what you've got to decide. You don't have to be cheeky like Steve Irwin or like Richard Branson. You might be the exact opposite. You might be very demure and very upmarket. You might be like the Palazzo Versace, but you've got to decide what your personality for your business is. Now, sometimes if it's a service-based business like mine is, I'm delivering IP, intellectual property, that's what I'm selling. So I'm not selling widgets as such. I'm selling them, sure, through digital platforms like, digital books and videos and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that it's not a widget. It's not like the microphone here. I'm delivering IP, intellectual property. And so therefore there's a very good chance that the demeanour of the Institute of WOW is going to be very close to my personal demeanour. If you've got products, though, or services, and you aren't the business, you are basically just behind the scenes, then of course you need to determine what that personality is going to be. Now, Apple, for example, is a classic case of a brand that many years ago, before Jobs brought it back again, lost its way. It didn't realise what it was. And of course, when he came back into the picture, he realised that they needed to be different from all of their competitors, from Microsoft and all the other people out there who came across somewhat technically savvy, but somewhat nerdy. He decided to turn nerdy into cool. And boy, the rest is history, of course. He turned nerdy technical stuff into the coolest brand on the planet, and continues to, the business continues to benefit from his foresight in the first place. Let me show you some other examples. Well, before I actually bring up a slide, let me show you this. I'll hold this up. There's a chocolate chain in America. I was over there recently, and I don't know whether I'm going to pronounce this right. I'm embarrassed not to be able to pronounce it correctly. It's Ghirardelli or I don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right, but I'll hold this up. This is a menu that I actually got from one of their ice cream shops in a Disney theme park, actually. Disney have let them into their theme park. And I wish I could pronounce it properly. I'm going to give it another shot. Ghirardelli, anyway. Have a look at their website. It's Ghirardelli. Ghirardelli. But anyway, this is their menu that you get when you walk into the store. Not the menu that's just sitting on the table, by the way, it's for you to go and find. But this is given to you by a very, sort of appropriately old 1950s sort of Happy Days clothing the staff wear. So it's a bit like your old Mel's Diner sort of clothing. And when you walk into the store, there's a girl standing there and gives you this gigantic menu. And the menu on it has all of these wonderful, wonderful desserts and things that you can get, chocolate, sort of sundaes and banana splits and all sorts of things. And inside the actual store, it's done out in, how's best to explain it, an upmarket Mel's Diner sort of feel. It's very fresh, believe it or not, despite the fact that they're selling ice cream sundaes and stuff. It looks healthy. The whole place just has this really fresh, clean ambience to it. It's just incredible in terms of what they've done to create an ice cream parlour ambience that's healthy. It's hard to put into words unless you're actually there, but you felt like you were actually in something that was almost organic in terms of feeling healthy, when in fact I don't know that this ice cream sundae, where is it, there, which is the chocolate multiplied by 10, and there's whipped cream and cherries and all sorts of bananas and all sorts of, I don't think that's particularly healthy. Not that they were lying and telling you that this is a health food shop, but by the same token they very cleverly created an ambience that it was unbelievable theatre for a start, because you saw all the people with the right hats on and the beautiful Mel's Diner clothing, and they're scooping up the ice cream and so forth, and it's got the appropriate music in the background. They didn't certainly highlight that it was healthy, they wouldn't do that, but it had theatre like you've never seen before. And typically, of course, I guess that's why Disney let them into their theme park. Let me give you another slide here. I want to show you a couple of examples of things where people got things right and people that got things wrong. This happens to be a cafe in Parramatta Leagues Club in Sydney, and they were a client for many years. And they had a cafe called Cafe 88, and the reason it was called Cafe 88 was because the numerals 8, the numeral 8 is a lucky number apparently in the Asian community, and so therefore in order to attract people who will pay poker machines, Asians, everything in clubs for, I guess, this particular era, I'm not sure whether they're going down that track now, but this was a few years ago, it had to have an 8 to it, okay, so it was called Cafe 88. Now you'll see on this particular layout a reasonably, I'll say reasonably upmarket look and feel. I'm not going to say upmarket look and feel because it was anything but that, but it was reasonably upmarket compared to what it was. If you had seen the cafe's marketing before this, and I wished I had a before and after to show you, it was very much Coles cafeteria style. It came across almost as you would expect a typical, almost staff cafeteria would look. When in fact the club had spent a lot of money and transformed this cafe from what it previously was, which I think was called the Park View Cafe because it had a view of a park. But anyway, and by the way, the view was really a car park. It wasn't a park. So anyway, I'm not even going to go down there, but yeah, it was called the Park View Cafe, and the view was a car park, not a park. So anyway, the point was that they transformed it to Cafe 88, created a lovely ambience. I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars they did, but anyway, they turned it into the cool, funky, modern, sort of minimalistic cafe, and it was still being promoted like it was previously as a Coles cafeteria cafe. So that's why I came along and said to them, look, for goodness sake, your message to market match is just not happening. You've got a lovely cafe now, which is not very upmarket, but reasonably upmarket. Let's make sure that we get that across. And I'll just bring it back on the screen to you now. I want to go through the contents of that so you understand what it's all about. You'll notice the headline says an exciting new experience that everyone's talking about. Well, of course, I don't know whether they were, but I said that, and they should have been, even if they hadn't been. So hopefully this would influence them to talk about it. Experience Cafe 88 for yourself. So therefore, we're luring them by saying, look, this is an incredible new experience. Have a look at the people enjoying themselves here. You will notice that I've made sure that we've got full tables. The thing that clubs are unbelievable at is that they tell everyone they've got a really popular restaurant, and then they show a photo of empty tables in the restaurant. And that happens time and time again, not just in the club industry, by the way, but many restaurants do that as well. We've got a really, really successful restaurant here. Have a look at our empty restaurant. No one's here. So then you'll see that what I've done is that I've given a montage of the sort of food that they have, given some snapshots of, close-ups of people enjoying that. On the right-hand side of the top double-page spread there, we give some samples of the sort of stuff that they can have. Then on the next double-page spread is an editorial spread, where basically we explain, why it's proven to be so successful and why people are coming in there. And you'll see on the right-hand page there where it says members rave about Cafe 88. That's really, really important. If you're going to create a new brand persona for your business, and let's just go back to Rob and Julie's Gold Coast Bakery, the moment that they do renovate the cafe to look, more cafe bakery rather than just old world bakery, then what they want to do very quickly, and I explained this to them when I met them throughout the week, is get testimonials, and not written ones, video testimonials, so that they can use them on their Facebook page and their website. And of course, everybody will admit that they're going to certainly give more credence to a video testimonial from someone else than you just ranting and raving how good you are yourself. And so therefore, in the Cafe 88 instance, I made sure that from the moment they opened up this new cafe, they collected lots and lots of video testimonials, which of course were transcribed to copy if it was going to be a print advertisement. You can't do much about video on that. But that's really, really important too, that if you are going to be projecting a brand persona of whatever, up market, down market, in the middle, then you need to make sure that whoever is going to be endorsing you on video testimonials falls into that target audience that you're chasing. So the Wheel of Wow, when we talk about identifying your most profitable target audience, and let's say that in the Greater Building Society's instance many years ago, it was a working class person. That's just the way it is. People who were earning a certain level of income tended to go and get their home loans from a bank no matter what. They might have been beaten up with fees and charges, and they didn't get treated personally, and the bank didn't know their name, and all those things that you've heard me complain about. But the fact is that they were very difficult to get an upmarket white collar person to deal with a building society or a credit union, which is below them. Okay, so our target audience at the Greater Building Society for home loans was working class people. Hence, the brand persona that we created was working class. Hence, that's why we gave away a free holiday with every home loan, because a working class prospect really needs a free holiday but probably can't afford one. That's why we got Jerry Seinfeld to be their spokesperson, and we didn't get, for example, Prince Charles, okay, because that would have been way too upmarket. I don't think Prince Charles probably would have said yes, but anyway, I needed an upmarket person to throw into that whole analogy then. And so therefore, we had message to market match. If you're going to have someone endorsing your products or your services, make sure they come from within that most profitable target audience segment that you've identified right up front. Because as you know, in that Wheel of Wow that I've got, the very first quadrant of the 5, that doesn't make sense, does it? But the very first pizza piece of the 5 pizza pieces is identify your most profitable customer and then look for more people who look like them. So if you're going to have a testimonial, make sure it's from people who fall into that most profitable customer audience segment. Okay. Now let me show you another one. I've got a few slides here. The second one here I've got coming up is, give me a second. It is, hang on, I've got a blank screen. Okay, yeah, let me show you this. This is this is Parramatta Leagues Club, and I've dug out from my archives a few Parramatta Leagues Club samples because look, it's something which is actually close to my heart at the moment, because I've created a big promotion that I'm selling clubs at the moment where they can give away $1 million, and it can entice a lot of people to come backwards and forwards to their clubs. And so I've been dealing with a number of clubs lately, and it's brought back some of the interesting, sort of funny case studies that I have in my archives. to do with clubs. And this happens to be Parramatta Leagues Club. That was the front page of their bulletin, obviously at a Christmas time. First of all, I don't think it provides anyone with any idea of their ambience. Parramatta Leagues had just been through a renovation, so they had really increased the amenities in their club, and that Cafe 88 was one of them, and yet they were still putting this crap out. Okay, now this is what happens when you don't have any idea of what your brand persona is. What I brought up on the screen next to you is a club that was just as silly. This happens to be, what was it? I think if I look closely, I think it's called the Westport Club, and it was Mother's Day, so they decided to waste the front page of their bulletin that they would send out to their 40,000 members by showing a picture of a little child hugging mum. Who cares? Okay, I mean, if it was going to be a health and well-being brochure, or if it was a relationships brochure, get to know your children, or it was a family first brochure or something, fine. This is a casino brochure. This is poker machines, entertainment, restaurants, lawn bowls, and whatever else goes with it. That imagery on both of those magazines just should not be there. These are the bulletins that are sent out to their members, by the way, and just ridiculous. I mean, what they should be doing on the front page of their bulletin is recognising just what the magazines do, and that is if they want to get someone to open up the publication, the magazines put George Clooney or one of the royal family, or they put some sort of scandal from one of the celebrities on the front cover, so that A, you'll buy it, and B, you might open it up and read more about it. But in this instance, the front cover is just wasted. They've put some silly Christmas ball bills on one, and then on the other one just a meaningless photo of mum and daughter because it happened to be around Mother's Day. Well, you don't give up that sort of equity, if you like, in terms of your 24 or 48 or 84 page brochure. You don't give up the front page that easily. And let me show you what we have done for these sorts of people. Before I show off and show you what we've done, I've got to show you just another one. This was the Parramatta Leagues Bulletin. Can you imagine getting that in the mail and you're a member of that club, just screaming out to your husband or wife going, "Oh wow, look, the Parramatta Leagues Bulletin has just arrived. Look at the directors. Oh, they're gorgeous. We've got to get into that club and spend all our money." It was just crazy, okay? And that's what we did to fix it. And I think that says it all. We're talking about a leagues club. We're talking about a casino. And so therefore, really, it needs to be positioned very much like a Las Vegas or Macau casino. That's what the damn thing is. So there's no need to hide the fact that, it is a poker machine palace. It's an entertainment palace. It's a leisure palace. That's the sort of demeanour that you should be promoting. Let's face it, it's a leagues club, for goodness sake. So you'll see that I think the one on the on the right might just be a little better than the one next to it. Here's another classic example of Parramatta Leagues, and again, the brand persona just not matching what it should. They had just done a renovation of the club, and look at that. They decided to show you a picture of their car park. Again, can you imagine that arriving in the mail and you just excitingly at the dinner table that night saying to your husband or wife, "Oh, look at the car park at Parramatta Leagues. We've got to get there. We've got to get to that car park. You won't see another car park like that." Oh dear. So therefore, that's what we did. Okay. So I'm just showing you that in this instance, the demeanour of these businesses is all about being a casino. It's all about being a fun place to go where you can win lots of money on the poker machines and you can watch shows and you can do I guess a whole bunch of other leisure activities, from darts to carpet bowls to snooker. They have trivia nights. So they got all sorts of things happening there. But no, I think what we'll do is make a decision that we'll show them a photo of our car park. Oh my God. Again, a slight improvement, but still a waste of space. They've just got a pretty hostess there holding up a $10 voucher, and the front cover of that bulletin has just been underutilised. We come along and say, no. Look, if you want to, stimulate renewal of membership, give them something that's going to be a wow. And of course, you can see what that was there. It was 20 cents per litre off the petrol. And this is the classic of all classics. This is another bulletin front cover from Parramatta Leagues, because the reception desk, without any members even being in the club, of course, is a huge draw card. We all know that. Can you? I've got to role play it. I'm sorry. I know that it's like a fart joke. I've just going to do this now for the third time because I thought I might have got a giggle the first time. Can you imagine getting this bulletin in the mail? Let me just bring it back again. And you just screaming out to your husband or wife, oh, wow, look at their reception desk. Oh, and they've got that like Christmas bunting there. We've got to get in there, get the kids, get the whole family, ring up your friends. I've never seen a reception desk like this. Okay. So anyway, look, it's just bemusing to me. Hopefully it is to you too. So they've got this brand new revitalised Lease Club. They spent $1 gazillion on making it all modern, and the Cafe 88, as I mentioned to you, was one example of that. But right throughout the club, it had been really very stylishly refurbished, and yet they show a picture of the reception desk, okay, with obviously the receptionist having a fake phone call. Let me just bring this one up to you. This happens to be the middle of one of the catalogues, and again, you can see my influence in that. By the way, when we put this promotion on, I'm going to show off here, but when we did put this promotion on, their poker machine revenue within 2 weeks lifted by 32%. So don't let anyone tell you that the lure of $1 million is not pretty powerful. I have so many people saying to me from time to time, oh, JD, I think people like to, sort of have lots of little prizes to win these days. They don't believe that the $1 million will ever be won, and so therefore I think we should give away lots of cups and saucers and maybe, loaves of bread and stuff like that. And I go, well, that's because you're suffering from dickhead-itis. If indeed, loaves of bread or maybe a week's worth of groceries worked, then Channel 9 would have told Eddie Maguire to host a show called Who Wants to Win a Week's Worth of Groceries. It wouldn't have been Who Wants to Win a Millionaire, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So just cast all of that rubbish aside. When was the last time you entered a contest to win a week's worth of groceries, or even a motor car for that matter? The bar has been set these days by the television networks with Deal or No Deal, or with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, or any one of the other quiz shows. The fact is that they're giving away hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And if you want to get someone's attention these days, when all of that's happening around them anyway, you need to be the okay? You need to provide them with a big prize. And to me, that's 50,000 or 100,000 or 250 or a million, whatever it might be. And of course, this is one of those insured prize promotions. So as I've said to lots of members of our environment, you can get a $100,000 prize from the insurance companies that we can provide you with the contact details of for about $2,000, as long as the probability of that prize being won at the major draw is 1 in 250. Okay, so if it's a 1 in 250 probability at the major draw that envelope will be chosen, they choose one envelope from the 250, then the insurance company will give you $100,000 for about $2,000. 250,000, I think it's around about $4,000, and for 500,000, obviously it's about $8,000. Okay, but that's a 1 in 250 probability. And if you wanted to know more about that, then of course just contact us. But you would have been given the download for our insured prize promotion blueprint, where all the details and samples are in there. Let me bring up another slide here. Oh, this is look. I've got to show you this one. This is I think a very potent case study for what we're talking about in terms of adding wow to your appropriate brand persona. So let's just say that in Parramatta Lease Club, they've decided to position themselves, once I came along, from being previously a doddery old little lease club with let's show pictures of the car park and maybe we could show some pictures of the ladies playing bingo, to now being a vibrant Las Vegas style leisure centre, where it's not just all about the gaming. In fact, there's lots of rules that have been brought in where you've got to be very careful what you say about gaming. And because of that, it was even more important to create a gaming sort of Las Vegas atmosphere because we couldn't use specifically terminology like come in and win on the machines. Those days are gone. So therefore, we've got to create the aura, even more importantly, the right brand persona now, to tell people that this is a place of fun, and infer very clearly that there's gambling in there, but you can't show a picture of a poker machine anymore. So you can imagine my skills were really tested because we couldn't show a picture of a poker machine, nor can we actually say win X dollars on the poker machine because of the anti-gambling lobbies and all that sort of stuff, which are stronger probably than even the anti-smoking ones. Then you are restricted in terms of marketing poker machines. And so therefore I had to really think hard with regards to how we would position the brand of this club. And not just Parramatta Leafs, by the way. I looked after Panthers, and I looked after a whole bunch of other larger clubs for some time. So I'm sort of pretty au fait with what the club industry is up against in terms of government regulations. This one here, let me bring it back on the screen. Because they still had a working class audience, we had to be careful that we were positioning the club certainly as a Las Vegas venue, but at the same time we had to make sure that we were providing Aussie tucker, okay, because there was a large Asian and Arab audience which played the poker machine, but by virtue of the articles of association of a lot of these clubs, you are almost, forced to make sure that you are still looking after the Anglo-Saxon audience. There's a whole long story to that, but I won't bore you with it. And so therefore, in their cafe, they still did have hamburgers and steak and egg and chips and all those sorts of things. And so they should. There was a still good portion of their audience that wanted that. Not their whole audience were not Asians and Arabs. They just happened to be a large poker machine playing part of their audience. And so therefore, when I was talking to them, they said, oh, well, we've got to have the hamburger. I said, no, you don't. You don't just have to have the hamburger. You've got to have the best hamburger in the world. Just like you've heard my story about me convincing the coffee shop at Sanctuary Cove that they had the best coffee in the world, okay? Well, at least the best coffee on the Gold Coast. And once they actually started marketing, we've got the best coffee on the Gold Coast, guess what? People were driving from Runaway Bay, miles away, to go to Sanctuary Cove because they'd heard that they had the best coffee on the Gold Coast. Now, in this instance, I said, you've got to have the best, the biggest, the grandest, or whatever hamburger in town. And so that's what we did for $7.95. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, so therefore that's probably more than that now. But at that time, that was a premium price for a hamburger. And so we just said, we've got the biggest hamburger meal in the land. Now, I wanted to say the biggest hamburger meal in Australia, but their legal and compliance manager said, oh, can we tone that back a bit because there might be a bigger one in North Queensland or there might be a bigger one in Darwin. I went, oh, God, you people. Anyway, so we had to cross our T's and dot our I's, and we brought it back to the biggest hamburger meal in the land. When we put that out in that particular bulletin, and we promoted it via pull-up banners at the reception area, you've seen the reception area on the front of that bulletin, they had an increase of 80% within 3 days of their hamburgers. It just went whooshka. Why? Because it was no longer just a hamburger. The brand persona that we gave to their hamburger, and I want you to take note of this, is that it was the biggest in the land. Now, it was the biggest because I think we put a little bit extra lettuce and tomato on it, so we made the hamburger stack up. To make it the biggest, I think it was all of like, I don't know, 5 or 10 cents worth of extra lettuce and tomatoes. But the fact is that photograph, let me just bring you back to the photograph of that hamburger again. Can you see what we've done there? We've turned it into a, Fred Flintstone Brontosaurus hamburger and made sure that it looks like the biggest hamburger you have ever seen. And of course, what we wanted to do is still make sure that we were doing it under the brand persona of Cafe 88. So guess what? We don't have a tradie with a blue singlet munching into it. We've got the chef from the Cafe 88 restaurant serving it to you. So we've retained the brand persona of the cafe. I just want you to take into consideration here the psychology or the mix of psychology that we're using here. We didn't sell out. I know a hamburger goes hand in hand maybe with a traditional milk bar, but as you guys know, these days, gosh, the hamburger stores like the Grill have now turned hamburger into a savvy sort of funky meal these days. It's not what it used to be at the milk bar. Well, we were ahead of our time because this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. We were turning it into, if you like, a somewhat savvy meal and making sure that we didn't hurt the brand persona of the cafe. We had the chef giving it to you, but we were still, if you like, looking after those people who wanted a hamburger. And when we did the biggest hamburger in the land, we're talking an 80% increase in sales within 2 or 3 days. It went more than that. I forget what the numbers are now because it's quite some time ago. Okay, let me just show you another slide here. This happens to be one where, again, I'm concentrating on Parramatta because I think it's a classic case of them getting their brand persona wrong before I came along. They knew that they needed the refurbishments and they went ahead and did that, but then they didn't catch up with the refurbishments with their communications. And I think there's a lot of people that go through that. This happens to be a suggestion that I gave them for their Cafe 88. I said to them, look, why don't you from time to time consider actually creating a week or a month of a particular theme? So therefore, I think if you're like me and my wife, you get sick and tired of a restaurant just sticking with the same menu over and over and over again. I don't know why restaurants, or more restaurants, don't have the specials, not specials as in price discounts, but the special menu that they give you every now and again just to freshen things up. That's what McDonald's do. That's why they bring the Hawaiian burger out and put a bit of pineapple on it on 1 month, and then of course they call it the Aussie burger by putting something else on it the next month. They actually change the menu. And I don't know why restaurants don't do that. So I said to the Parramatta Leaks people, why don't you consider themes for your Cafe 88? Because it's just a traditional, nice, savvy cafe at the moment. But if you really wanted to take advantage of, giving it some theatre, then you could have maybe the first week of each month a particular theme. And that's why I came up with this particular idea. They didn't do this, by the way. I can't give you any case study results on this. Unfortunately, they chose not to do it, and that's their decision, or their loss, I should say, sarcastically. But this is something that any restaurant can do if they are of a regular, everyday theme. I mean, obviously a Chinese restaurant would not do this, okay? And obviously a French restaurant would not do this. But in their instance, where it was a traditional mixed menu theme, Cafe 88, I suggested they might like to do that. They were very interested in it, but they had a management change. That's what happened. It's not like they weren't going to do it because it was a dumb idea, JD. They had a management change and didn't do it. Now, I know that you're not perhaps in the restaurant game, but can you retheme certain parts of your business from time to time? Is there a way that you can utilise the equity of themes that are already out there? In America, a lot of the businesses there take advantage of the Labour Memorial Holiday, and they have the Memorial Day event. They take advantage of July 4. I know that we have Australia Day and we have our events here as well, but you might be able to borrow the equity of some of those big events and tack them onto some of the communications that you're using for your products or services at the time. Just think, is there any way you can theme something? I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and I said to them, I gave them a case study about a nappy company that came on board at one stage, and they had organic nappies, which meant that they weren't the cheapest in town, and they were up against Huggies. And Huggies has been in the supermarkets and in the shelves for quite some time, and I forget the other player now. It's been a while since we've had children that age, so I can only remember Huggies. But I said to this particular woman, she said, oh, look, we have to drop our price if we're going to match Huggies. And you know what I think about dropping prices. And I said, no, you don't have to do that. And they said, well, what can we do? I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you give away a point for every bulk packet that they buy of a dozen nappies, and you give away a point, a reward point. So therefore you get away from price discounting. It's get a home loan, get a free holiday, take their eyes off the price, okay? And when they save up X number of those points, I don't know what it would be, they get a free Disney bassinet toy. The toys where Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck or the Toy Story people, whatever it might be, just go around and around, and eventually the baby, well, in principle, falls asleep. And I don't know what they cost, but I was just giving them that idea. I said what would happen is that they save up so many points, and when they've gained, let's say 20 points for argument's sake, they get a free Disney toy. Now the beauty of that is that you're borrowing the equity of a massive entertainment company and using it to your advantage. The fact is that you've not taken out the license with Disney. The toy company took that out well before you. You're just buying that product and then giving it away for free as a bonus with your product. And I told them to run off and talk to their solicitor if they wanted to double, triple check with regards to the legality of that. But in my opinion, the fact of the matter is the royalties have already been paid by the toy company to Disney, so I can't see why you couldn't give that away. I mean, let's put it this way. If you give away a BMW as a prize in a competition, I don't think you need to go and get a license from BMW to do that. If you give away a trip to Universal Studios, I don't think you need to go and get Universal Studios license to give away that. So I believe that is a great option for anyone. Try and look at the equity that's sitting out there that someone else has built up and see if you can borrow it without having to pay money. Okay. Again, if you've got any fears or concerns with any of that, check with your solicitor. I always say that. But in my opinion, I can't see that there's any problem with doing that. Let me just bring up a couple of others before we finish up here. If you are going to have a reward scheme, you might like to consider a reward card that actually denotes the brand persona or the personality that you've created. And in this instance, it happens to be quite a nice cafe in Sanctuary Cove. It was called Saint Tropez Cafe. Okay, and so therefore that was a VIP privilege card. We knew that inside Sanctuary Cove there were, some wealthy people, and so therefore we decided to make sure that we did our best to get them to return over and over again. Now, whether they're wealthy people or whether they're poor people, everyone likes to be treated specially. And I know myself, I just think it's fantastic when I get to the airport on a Friday afternoon and there are lines and lines and lines of just ordinary people getting into their ordinary seats. But I am a Gold Velocity member of Virgin, and I just enjoy being like Mr. Bean and pulling out my card and showing it to these people as I walk past the poor sods who are going to be waiting there for another half hour before they talk to anyone behind the counter. I go straight up to the VIP counter, thank you very much. And I don't really do the Mr. Bean showing my card, but I feel like I should do that sometimes. It was last Friday afternoon. I was in Melbourne and coming back, and it was peak hour, like, 6 o'clock, and there was a mile of people lined up to the Virgin and Jetstar counters, and I just thought, oh, thank God I'm a member of this Velocity Club, because it's so nice to walk up and be treated like a VIP. And that's what this card was all about here at the Saint Tropez Cafe. I'll bring it back up again. It was all about making sure that the people within Sanctuary Cove got treated specially, and they were all given a VIP card in their letterbox, and they were told that if they come to Sanctuary Cove's cafe on a regular basis, they would get privileges. I've got to show you a transformation of brand persona here. This happens to be that cafe prior to me coming along, or prior to them being a member of my program. And have a look at what the sign outside of their restaurant looked like. I think if Rob and Julie from the Gold Coast Bakery are still watching this webinar, then they'll see that there's some similarities here to what I was saying to them throughout the week. Look at this. This is a Sanctuary Cove cafe, an upmarket cafe where millionaires come in to have a cup of coffee, and look at that piece of crap. Look at that piece of rubbish outside his restaurant. Steve Fenton was the owner of this restaurant, and he lives in Scotland now. He sold the restaurant, he's a Scottish guy, moved back to Scotland, but I think he liked my sarcasm, my humour, because he kept on saying to me, give me more of those insults, right? I said, mate, I don't know what you were smoking when you came up with this sign, but it must have been good, so I want some of it. We changed it to this, okay? I haven't got a photo of the actual signage as it appeared outside the restaurant, but that's what we changed it to. And I'll put them side by side for you, okay, so you can see. Oopsie daisy, let me come back to that. Let me just come back to that. I think I pressed it. Yeah, there you go. Can you see a slight difference in the signage? And of course, once we put the sign, and it was a beautiful illuminated sign, not a piece of metal like that rubbish that, I don't know, I think he must have got the local handyman to put together. And look at the beautiful colours, by the way, bright yellows and and a cartoon chef. Oh, doesn't that spell Crazy Clark's $2 store, okay? The moment that we put the illuminated sign next to him up, his trade went nuts. Now, I cannot remember what the increase was, because again, this was a few years back, but I remember him saying to me, oh my God, joining your program was worth it just for that. Just before we leave, we're just about on time. I wanted to bring up one more slide. These are website transformation. Sorry, these are menu transformations for this same restaurant. Now, this is what he used to have at the Cafe Saint Tropez for a breakfast menu, and that's what we turned it into. I think you can see there's a pretty significant before and after. This is what his lunch menu used to look like, and this is what we turned it into. By the way, you might be wondering, well, why those specific photos? All we did was looked at the most profitable dishes that he had for breakfast, dinner, and lunch and dinner, and they're the ones that we took the photos of. And guess which ones he sold most of? You got it, the ones with the photos. And this was his dinner menu. Give me a second, I think it's coming up. Yep, and that's what we changed it to. And again, can you see the vast difference? Now, I know that I've tended to concentrate to a degree in this particular webinar on some hospitality businesses. It's just that they're easy to show you the before and afters. Just think about your business. What is the brand persona that you should be promoting? One, before we go, I've got to show you this. This was his coffee menu. Now, I don't have a before and after, but you can imagine that if I can just bring the slide back here now, you'll see that this is the dinner menu, the before and after. His coffee menu was no different, okay? I don't happen to have a photograph of that, but I'll show you what we changed his coffee menu to, and you'll see why his coffees just went through the roof. Oh God, my clicker's not working as well as it should, sorry. Okay, so therefore there's the coffee menu, and once he put that on the tables, it went nuts. What we did is that we put his coffee prices up by around about 25%, and nobody noticed. Of course nobody noticed. When you've got a menu like that sitting on your table, screaming an upmarket brand persona for being the coffee kingdom, if you like, no one's going to look at the price. And his coffees went nuts. It was some silly number. It was like 150% or something increase within like the first week. It was just nuts. And of course it wasn't so much just the 150% increase in the number of coffees he was selling, but of course when you put the price up by 25%, it made a significant difference to his bottom line. So there you go, guys. Look, we're sort of out of time. Just thought I'd make sure that I highlighted the importance of this, because the thing is that I'm probably renowned for providing businesses with measurability in their marketing. And that's what direct response marketing is all about, providing you with stuff that's going to be measurable. And sometimes people say, "Oh, does that mean that you're not interested in building a brand?" No, of course I am. Of course I am. It's just that for most small businesses, they haven't got the budget like Nike or Toyota or Coca-Cola have to be sponsoring the Olympics or the Brisbane Broncos or some other sporting or celebrity sort of function. They can't sponsor the Academy Awards and then wait for 5 years till they build that brand and people come in. You know that my mantra is not about getting them to fall in love with your brand so that they will taste your product. Mine is get them to taste your product so that they'll fall in love with your brand. So in other words, if you're a fish shop, you'd hand out the calamari outside the fish shop at lunchtime and dinner time, and they would come inside your fish shop, and if they do that often enough, they'd fall in love with your brand because they've taste tested it outside, they've come in, and so you'll see that whole formula that I live with is flipping the traditional model of getting them to fall in love with your brand so that they'll taste your product. This is all about getting them to taste your product and fall in love with your brand. However, at the same time, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can actually get them to buy stuff and be building your right brand personality at the same time. And that's why it's so important for me to get through to you guys that, yes, of course, I'm all about direct response marketing and making sure that, you get a measurable response on everything, but your communications have to be done in such a way that it's a right message to market match. You have to have the right personality around the message that you're giving. Guys, that's about it. So thank you. Hopefully I've crammed in a hell of a lot of stuff there, and hopefully you've got a lot out of it. Hopefully you've got writer's cramp. But you can always watch these back. As you know, we have them in our webinar page, so therefore you can certainly go into your membership site and watch these at any time. We're just at the end of it, so thank you very much. If I could just encourage you to make sure that you think particularly hard over this next week, what is your brand persona? What is the personality of your business and its products? And make sure that that's very loud and clear in all of your communications, including, of course, very important, including your website. Over and out. See you next time. Oh, by the way, of course, silly me, I can't forget that we have our teleconference lined up, so therefore we have a 5-minute break to go and have a coffee or make yourself a coffee or a restroom break and come back onto the teleconference number, which you've got all the details of, and ask me any questions you like. See you then.